We're back, and I'm always delighted to be able to say, welcome to Benjamin Weingarten, one of my favorite people. His credentials are impressive, especially for so young a man. He is the author of a terrific book, American Ingrate, about Ilhan Omar and her takeover of the Democratic Party, the progressive agenda. He is also a senior fellow at the Claremont Institute, as well as a very important contributor to the Federalist. And we're always delighted to have him be a contributor to us here at Securing America. Welcome back, Ben.
Frank, thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
A lot to talk with you about, and not a lot of time. Let me jump into one of the biggest stories that doesn't seem to be getting the kind of attention it seems to me it deserves, other than from your good self. Talk about the fact that this government in Iran, that the Biden administration is so determined to have consummate some kind of deal on, frankly, the most outrageous grounds imaginable. Certainly not one that will stop their nuclear ambitions. But at the same time that these desperate negotiations are taking place on the part of the United States, at least, the Iranian government, that very same mullahocracy, seems to be sending hitmen into the United States to kill a number of former senior officials, including among them former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. I know he's taking this very seriously. The rest of our government?
Well, it almost seems as if Iran is trying to act in the most brazen ways possible. And that is almost the point that no matter what Iran does, the Biden administration will kowtow to them in pursuit of what the Obama Biden administration pursued, which was making Iran and the mullahocracy the strong horse in the Middle East. And that, of course, is manifestly antithetical to America's national interest. It's an attempt to overturn the balancing between Sunni and Shia powers and more secular powers versus more Islamist powers in the Middle East, which was executed by the Trump administration. And in the process, of course, building a bulwark that would enable the U.S. to shoulder less of the load in that region. So, again, manifestly to our benefit. At every single turn, the Biden administration appears hell-bent on appeasing Iran to the nth degree. And the fact that, first of all, what's amazing about this story, and there are many amazing elements to it, is that these two individuals, it seems, with substantial ties, it would appear, to the Iranian regime, to Iranian intelligence. And we've known for years, of course, that Iran has wanted to target American officials purportedly on grounds of trying to take out Americans in response to the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. What's remarkable here is that it appears it was a postal service investigator, who sniffed out these two individuals. Now, we have an FBI that is concocting plots to create the appearance of purportedly Trump-aligned Americans kidnapping Governor Gretchen Whitmer in the throes of the 2020 election. We have apparently, according to one court filing, 20 plus federal assets on the ground on January 6th. But meanwhile, an individual who has been convicted for terroristic threats or terroristic activities, I believe, is able to shoot up a New York City subway. We had the shooting up by a foreign national of a synagogue in Texas. And so on the one level, there is this war on wrongthink, this effort to portray this grave threat of American citizens against the American system. But then on the other hand, actual actors from foreign powers in some cases and domestically as well are able to execute attacks seemingly with impunity. So there's rank incompetence here, it would appear, on top of the weaponization and politicization of our national security apparatus. And the last point I'll briefly make is that it is remarkable that these two individuals, it appears, will be released on bail to the custody of their family members by a judge overseeing many of the January 6 cases in DC. And as we know, there are scores of individuals being held in pretrial detention for months on end, American citizens, many of them with no criminal backgrounds, nonviolence in their background, but being held for months. And these two individuals are sprung almost immediately. Absolutely remarkable. It's stunning, and a damning indictment of where our betters are today.
A lot to pick up on there. We will be discussing some of that with Darren Beatty in our next segment. But to you, Ben Weingarten, what do we know about these two individuals, Haidar Ali and Aryan Taherzadeh, that might give us concern that the judge, in saying, well, there's no violence here, this is not a violent crime that they're being charged with, the appropriate response then is to let them out forthwith, at least on bail. Um, it sounds to me as though they had a lot of violence in mind. Did the government not make the case that that was so?
As far as the reporting indicates, it appears these individuals had a large weapons cache in the flat in which they were staying. How they were funding the lifestyle that they were living here, very unclear based on original reporting. We know that I believe there were Iranian stamps on their passports. Obviously, they were impersonating federal agents. That in and of itself is a massive red flag. And in particular, when you
And
know
crime.
a yeah, and a crime, and of course, to the extent they have ties to the Iranian regime, and the Iranian regime is talking about trying to assassinate senior U.S. officials, and then these individuals are trying to infiltrate the Secret Service. I mean, my God, what more would they have to do to be held in detention?
Well,
So
and to be expected of more serious criminal behavior, including violent. Let me ask you about this Secret Service business, because, of course, the Secret Service provides protection for government officials, including, I think, at the moment, some of those that are being targeted by this terrorist regime in Tehran. To the extent that these individuals were not only living a pretty high lifestyle themselves, but they were apparently giving very nice apartments rent free to Secret Service agents. That would seem to me to be a bit of a red flag, too, would it not?
This is just textbook compromise here. At minimum, the appearance of it, and they were cultivating relationships with federal officials. What does it say, by the way, about these officials that, to the best of our knowledge, none of them reported this up the chain? Suspicious behavior, the fact that these individuals were consorting with them in the first place and cultivating relationships with them. And this is the most basic stuff that you see on TV that should raise massive red flags. And so it just strains credulity. Again, I go back to this contrast between these individuals are now walking semi free, non citizens who, or I believe that they may be American citizens. I have to double check that. But these individuals had ties to the Iranian regime by all accounts and are engaging in all of these activities. And Americans are held in detention under horrible, abusive conditions by all accounts.
And this same judge, as you say, in some cases at least, is responsible for this odd mistreatment of some and favorable treatment of others. Ben, very much appreciate you being on this case, and I hope that you'll stay on it and you'll come back to us with updates about what you're learning, especially against the backdrop of this fraught negotiation taking place. Aggressive appeasement is a better term for it, by the Biden administration of the Iranian mullahs. It's a terrifying prospect that we're going to get the worst of all these worlds, a nuclear armed Iran, and much mayhem by them, or at least at their hands, even in our own country. Let me turn to another topic that you've addressed, and we only have a little bit of time to do this, Ben, but political warfare is an issue that we spend a lot of time focusing on here. Talk, if you would, a little bit about the political warfare that is being waged by Democratic partisans against lawyers who have worked for Donald Trump or otherwise represented his interests. This is a stunning story of, you know, well, persecution, it seems to me, of such individuals, including in some ways that seem to be wholly unethical in their own right.
And briefly, let me put this in context. I've been writing for the last 18 months about this war on wrongthink in America, with January 6th as the catalyzing event, the pretext to
And by
execute
wrong
as
think, just to define the term, you mean thinking ways that are not acceptable or at least aligned with that of the prevailing democratic regime?
democratic regime and its uniparty in some respects, the prevailing ruling class orthodoxy. And of course, they've exploited January 6th in an attempt to try and, well, lock Donald Trump up to get a Supreme Court justice to recuse from cases, if not impeach him, as well to try and disqualify current members of Congress from being able to run in the midterms on grounds that they supported insurrection. And so, this other manifestation of it is lawyers might not be the most sympathetic characters, but in this case, it's the rule of law which is really being assaulted. You know, Anthony Fauci talks about I am the science and this is an attack on science. Well, in this case, this really is an attack on the rule of law. Democrats, led by, among others, David Brock, who's behind Media Matters, have launched this 65 project, 65 being the number of lawsuits that the President Trump's campaign to put forward in the eve of the election, subsequent to the election, fighting allegations of election fraud and state laws being overridden by executives and their agencies. And what the Democrats are trying to do is not only shame those lawyers who actually litigated on behalf of President Trump, try to disbar them and change the rules so that lawyers literally cannot bring what they would call fraudulent election related lawsuits. They actually want to destroy these people in their communities. In the words of Brock, and I wrote this up in a piece of the Epoch Times, they actually want to make these people shunned in their communities. This is the politics of personal destruction on top of an attempt to savage the rule of law.
It is indeed. Ben Weingarten, brilliantly put as always and covered as well. We look forward to further visits with you in the very near future to get updates on all of these really vitally important stories. Thanks for the great work you continue to do, among other places, at the Federalist. We'll talk with you soon, my friend. Next up, we will speak with, as I mentioned, Darren Beattie.